Welcome everybody to the 231st meeting of the Council. With fellow Council officers and members of the public in attendance or listening to the meeting via Zoom, welcome to this evening's special Council meeting at Rutland County Showground. Before we start, I would just got one or two things I'd like to say, and then Mark Andrews has got a few more. Firstly, could I welcome Councillor Paul Brown to the Council? Nice to see you. Nice baptism of fire. Some easy reading to do to catch up. Could I ask everyone here, members and public, to respect what is said tonight? Everyone here has Rutland at heart, and we all want to do the best for our county. So please, do not make comments, etc. When members and officers are speaking, I want us all to walk from here tonight knowing that whatever the result, it was done in a dignified way, and that we can put all pull together to get the best result for Rutland. I have been requested by some members about having had backs and things, so if members during the meeting are finding it difficult to sit, I'm quite happy for them to have a stand, as long as they don't leave the room. It won't affect your vote, but if you do leave the room, then it will. I'll hand over to Mark now.
Thank you, Chairman. For listeners, this is Mark Andrews, Executive for Rutland County Council. Before I make a request to help us with the arrangements this evening, I think it's just important that a number of people have commented on our temporary arrangements, that we just reflect on why we have them. Last year we dedicated part of our building, including the council change, to the Rutland vaccination programme. This programme is coming to an end this month. It's enabled us to vaccinate 90% of the population of Rutland. However, like everything managing the pandemic, this has meant we had to compromise. I'm not going to pretend that tonight isn't in some way, in terms of arrangements, a compromise. What I hope is that members and the community will accept that compromise, given the impact that giving up our council chamber has had on managing the welfare of our community. So what I ask of people tonight is to help us with the arrangements. The councillors, first of all, could identify themselves with their name and the ward they represent each time they speak. Speak up and speak clearly, so our virtual audience has the best opportunity to follow the meeting. I'll also ask those with deputations and questions to do the same.
Thank you. Item 1 on the agenda is the apologies. Are there any apologies? No. So we'll be voting on 27. Chairman's announcements. I would like to refer members to the previously circulated announcement, which was regarding a single engagement. Item 3, announcements from leaders, members of the cabinet and head of paid service. I've been advised that there are no announcements to be made this evening. Declarations of interest. In accordance with the regulations, members are invited to declare any disclosable interests under the Code of Conduct and the nature of those interests in respect of items on this agenda or indicate if Section 106 of the Local Government Finance Act 1992 applies to them. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? No? Thank you. Item 5. I want to include all the deputations and questions tonight. On standing orders, we're only allowed half an hour. So for this item only, item 5, I would like to suspend standing orders so that all the deputies and questions are heard tonight. So could I have a proposal, please? Councillor Waller, seconder. Councillor Stevenson, get it right tonight. All those in favour? Thank you. We have several deputations of questions this evening, and I will invite members of the public to come to the prepared seats and present them in order that they will receive. But first, I would like to ensure that all the petitions... Oh, we've done it, sorry. Yeah. Firstly, we have a deputation from Sinclair Rogers of Ketton Parish Council. Please attend. You make your way forward. You have 5 minutes to present the deputation.
Thank you, Chair. Ketton Parish Council wishes to bring to your attention, ladies and gentlemen, what it considers to be one of the many unintended consequences of the County Council's rejection of its portion of the Housing Infrastructure Fund earliest this year. This rejection will have its impact on villages throughout the county that appears not to have been fully considered. At the meeting of the Parish Forum on the 23rd of August, it was suggested that following the withdrawal of the current local plan, there would be a planning free-for-all. A serious problem with this possible increase in the population of the village is that there is nothing like the addition to local resources that is needed to accommodate the increase. Although the County Council has designated Ketton as one of its service centres, the village already lacks essential services and has poor public transport. One cannot, for example, go from Ketton to Oakham by bus. At the time of writing, there are 4 planned applications for housing development in Ketton, which are likely to add some 20% to the population. The village is already struggling with problems of speeding and parking. Ketton Parish Council remains deeply concerned about the possibility of yet more development in the village and the lack of any accompanying infrastructure that will help all its new and established residents to benefit from living a happy and fulfilled life in Rutland. We hope the County Council will pay full attention to the needs and aspirations of the many villages in Rutland that contribute so much to the essential and special nature of the County of Rutland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Members, you have 5 minutes for questions. Have you got any questions? No? Thank you very much. Next, we have a question from Mr. David Vickery. You have 5 minutes to speak to ask your question.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is David Vickery and I live in Lidington. I have the support of my parish council in asking this question. I used to work as a senior planning inspector for the Planning Inspectorate, where my prime task was to examine local plans such as the one you are now preparing, and to carry out local plan advisory visits to councils. My question here today is meant, therefore, to be helpful, proactive and positive. Mr. Chairman, I am not expecting a detailed reply to my question, merely an assurance that the Council will use all the possibilities open to it to prevent unwanted and unsustainable development. I would have given you some more advice, but I've been told that I'm not allowed to under standing orders. But may I ask, now that you've suspended standing orders, am I allowed to add a few more paragraphs to what I've said? Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll get this up. The standing order that has been suspended is in relation to the timings only, not in relation to the content of the question. So please present the question as submitted, Mr. Vickery.
Right. Thank you. Well, as you all know, this is a very difficult situation for the council and its residents. There are no easy solutions.
Chairman, point of order. I thought the monitoring officer asked Mr Vickery to make his question and no other comments.
I am about to.
Can you keep to the script?
I am, yes, thank you. Thank you very much. My question, Mr Chairman, I formally put. If you'd given me 5 seconds more, I would have finished.
Do you want to read your question now?
I don't know, I formally put it. I was told by Mr Delaney that I needn't read the question out. I could ask the council to just formally take it on board, and I thought I'd not waste everyone's time. You've all got it in writing.
Thank you.
If I may help, councillors, Mr Vickery is perfectly entitled to put his question as written in the papers. Before you all members, I believe, have a copy of that question, and I don't have time to see that particular question. Councillor.
I'm just mindful of the fact that people are actually listening to this meeting, and I think it would help if you did read his question so people knew exactly what we are talking about. Not everybody has an opinion.
I'm very happy to, Mr Chairman. I was just told to save time, so I was trying to help you. But my question is, if the report's recommendations are approved to withdraw the submitted local plan, will the council in the interim, until a new local plan is prepared and adopted, take advantage of the recent Court of Appeal judgment, Appeal Investments, to enhance its prospects of resisting speculative and unplanned housing developments by 1. Preparing a publicly accessible planning document, regularly updated, of those environmental protection and other policies in its existing adopted local plan which it considers not to be out of date in terms of paragraph 11D of the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework. Preparing supplementary planning documents under the regulations by using the work already undertaken for the submitted local plan to update the settlement hierarchy planning policies which guide development locations in Rutland. That's policies CS3 and CS4 of the adopted core strategy. That's because an SPD is a material consideration in decision making. 3. Preparing a supplementary planning document by using the work already undertaken for the submitted local plan to update the planned limits of development set out in policy SP5 of the adopted site allocations and policies DPD. 4. Where necessary, updating key conservation area appraisals in those towns and villages likely to be under development pressure to ensure that key open spaces, views and sensitive building groups are highlighted as areas to be kept free of development.
Members, you have 5 minutes to ask your questions. No, sorry, I've got Councillor Zell first.
Chairman, thank you. Mr Vickery, we are aware of the stated Court of Appeal judgment. This will be relevant in decision making irrespective of any further action the Council could take to resist speculative and unplanned housing developments. The appeal case, as well as Gladden Developments Limited versus Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, brackets 2021, EWCA, CIP 104, make it clear that the decision maker can take into account conflict with development plan policies in applying the tilted balance in favour of development under paragraph 11D, brackets 5 of the National Planning Policy Framework. However, the weight to be given to those environmental policies is a matter of judgment for the decision maker in the circumstances of any proposal. On any appeal where relevant, the Council would therefore refer to and rely upon the approach of the Court of Appeal in those cases in any event, but the tilted balance would still have to be applied. Reports of Planning Committee will still be expected to include advice on relevant planning policies to be taken into account by the decision maker. In direct response to question 1, paragraph 11D, and the accompanying footnotes make it clear that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development where the policies which are most important for determining the application are out of date. The footnote accompanying this specifies that if this includes for applications involving the provision of housing, situations where the local planning authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, brackets with the appropriate buffer as set out in paragraph 74, or where the housing delivery test indicates that the delivery of housing was substantially low, less than 75% of the housing requirement over the previous 3 years. Whilst the suggested document might be helpful for public awareness, the document itself would have little or no weight in planning decision making. It may assist in providing guidance to developers and decision makers, but there will still be the matter of judgment for the decision maker in the circumstances of any proposal. There is also a time and cost producing such a document, which would need to be balanced against the need to focus on the preparation of a new local plan as soon as possible. A new local plan is still considered to be the most effective way for the council to achieve a 5-year housing supply in a planned way. As set out in the report to council, it is recommended that approval is therefore given to the preparation of the new local plan. In response to questions 2 and 3, again, these will take considerable time and staff resource to prepare which would need to be balanced against the imperative to prepare a new local plan. The recommendation to prepare a new local plan will offer the opportunity to look again at settlement hierarchy and other policies, including the core strategy. Despite the submitted local plan evidence base, the process of preparing an SPD is estimated to take around 2 years, allowing for its preparation, approval for consultation, consultation in line with the Council's statement of community involvement, subsequent reviews take account of comments made through the consultation, and subsequent adoption by the Council. There is also a significant risk of the approach suggested by Mr. Vickery in his question, as there is a danger that introducing a new policy through SPD may be subject to legal challenge, possible, taking account of case law, William Davis Limited versus ORS and Charnwood Borough Council 2017, EWHC 3006, brackets admin, brackets 23 November 2017. In response to question 4, again, we recognise the benefit of updating conservation area appraisal. The request of funding to mitigate the impact of operating without a plan includes the need to recruit a full-time conservation officer, which, in part, will support a review of conservation areas. This will also take time and will feed into the process of making a new local plan. Given the extent and number of conservation areas in Rutland that require reappraisal, then this is a long-term task for the Council to address. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You have the opportunity for a supplementary.
Mr. Chairman, am I allowed to wish you all the very best of British luck? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vickery.
Sure. No questions. We have a deputation from
It is a point of order, Chairman. Sorry, I understood that we were to ask or have the opportunity to ask questions of the deputation. I just listened to a very long statement. I had a question myself.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. I was asked a question, providing an answer to that question. It was not a deputation.
Thank you, Chairman, for that clarity. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, it's here. We have a deputation from Mr. David Ross.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is David Hodson and I am a resident of Greetham. The consequences of accepting the recommendation put for you are clearly laid out in the report. It will cost £1.4 million. This will have a significant impact on the services which Rutland can provide, outlined in clause 2 of the report. It will take a minimum of 4 years to create a new plan. See the table at the end of the report. The county will not have an up-to-date strategic policy framework to meet its identified housing and development needs, i.e. no 5-year housing supply, clause 214. The NPPF requires that the default position on planning applications is that they be granted except in special circumstances, i.e. builders can build where they want, not where we want them to, clause 2.16. St George's Barracks is a brownfield site, and like it or not, it will be developed in one way or the other, clause 2.17. The Council for Preservation of Rural England argue that the government has got its figures wrong. The number of houses is not required in the country, and Rutland's share is too big. Are you prepared to gamble on the future of Rutland in trying to overturn this government policy? The Council for Preservation of Rural England also argue that additional houses should be scattered around small villages rather than located in a sustainable community. Local service centres such as Whissendine, Market Overton, Ryle, Essendon, Cottesmore will have to take a significant number of extra houses. Where is the evidence that these villages want these extra houses? Anyone who lives in a small village knows that most of the residents have to travel everywhere for shopping, work, school, medical services. These are not sustainable communities and should not be continually expanded. Trying to get a consensus among a group of people on widely different interests is never going to be easy, but surely there comes a time when the greater good has to take priority. On a world scale, fighting climate change must be a top priority. On a national scale, it is fighting COVID. At county council level, it is having a local plan. Without it, there is no plan for Rutland for housing development will be uncontrolled. No one can doubt how long and tortuous the path is in creating a local plan. There is no guarantee that we will not end up in the same impasse as we are now in 4 years' time. Is that what you really want? I suggest that the consequences of the recommendation are far worse than continuing with the plan. Please be careful what you wish for. Please reject the recommendation to withdraw the local plan and revisit the decision to reject the KIFB. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members, we have 5 minutes for any questions. Thank you very much. We have a deputation from Mr. Ron Simpson, Chairman of the CPRE.
Evening, Chairman, members. I speak on behalf of the President, Trustees and Executive of CPRE Rutland. CPRE is a countryside charity that campaigns to promote, enhance and protect the countryside for everyone's benefit, whichever parish they live in. Here in Rutland, the countryside charity has been engaged with the developing local plan from the outset and has submitted a detailed professional response on its current inadequacies to the planning inspector for the proposed planning inquiry. Rutland is a small community with a history of positive county and parish relationships. It is with great sadness that the charity witnesses the public division being created by both the content and the process embodied in the public preparation and approval of the new local plan. The charity therefore welcomes the key officer and presumably the council leadership recommendation in tonight's report that the local plan be withdrawn and a new plan prepared that might reflect a stronger consensus of community opinion on housing and infrastructure needs. The charity sees the key benefits of accepting the principal recommendation to withdraw the submitted plan as follows. The opportunity to found a modified or new plan on the forward vision for Rutland being identified in the Rutland conversation. The key weakness of the current plan is that it is not linked to any community approved goals. Such a decision would pause the extensive extensive and expensive legal work being prepared by a wide range of organisations for the pending planning inquiry in what is shaping up to be a memorable conflict. The outcomes of the Council are likely to be significant expense and a requirement for substantial change in the summative plan. The opportunity to restore and strengthen the planning function with additional resources in Rutland, which is clearly believed by many to be more orientated than it should be towards the aspirations and processes of South Kester and BC. Fourth, an opportunity to revisit the widely disputed future housing requirements for Rutland and to correct the extraordinary decision to give the critical housing allocation 650 homes to SKDC and thereby address the reality of the requirement for a deliverable 5-year housing supply. Fifth, the opportunity to strengthen planning policy and development control around MOD-owned land and other similar brownfield sites to reflect their rural setting and effectively resist any undesired future application. And sixth, the opportunity to further support all villages and the county's 2 market towns in meeting their actual environmental, housing, transport and economic needs by enabling a more community neighbourhood plans, empowering locally determined site allocations and assessing the need. Turning to the further recommendations in the report, the charity has concerns about the predetermined processes, costs and staffing limitations put before members of council as necessary to move forward with the new local plan. While accepting the view that it is wise to prepare for receipt of a number of speculative planning applications in the coming months, it is a widely held view that the council's most critical need is the appointment of an additional, very senior, qualified and experienced planning officer. He or she would then be able to help take council forward by creating an integrated policy and development control team, which is fit for purpose given the declared direction of travel of government on planning matters. CPR Rutland therefore urges the council to give further consideration to the future staffing requirements necessary to deliver an effective local plan that will both sustain and protect the county's heritage and economy. In summary, CPR Rutland, having considered all the implications and risks detailed in the report, applauds the principal recommendation put before council members to make a fresh start on a new local plan linked to the future vision for Rutland emerging from the Rutland conversation. The charity would prefer to collaborate with such a venture than win a battle. Members need to look no further than the clarity provided in paragraph 6.2 of the report to understand that the onlooking planning inspector will expect such a decision. It clearly states that the submitted plan is unlikely to meet the required test of soundness and the council is advised to withdraw it. If more conviction is required, view paragraph 4.1, which advises that if the current plan proceeds to examination, there is a high risk it will be found to be not sound. As a bonus, those as yet unsure about the recommendation to withdraw can take part in paragraph 12.4 with its proposals for a comprehensive engagement for the future. Surely that is something we can all agree on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Members will have 5 minutes. Thank you very much. We now have a deputation from Mr. Andrew Cranston, Chairman of Moorcote Parish Council.
I do not intend to repeat the many valid arguments which support the withdrawing of the current Regulation 19 local plan, all of which Oh, sorry. Andrew Johnson, Chairman of Moorcote Parish Council. Sorry, I think you'd seen that in the paper. I'll start again. I do not intend to repeat the many valid arguments which support the withdrawing of the current Regulation 19 local plan, all of which are endorsed by Moorcote Parish Council. Instead, I would like to draw your attention to 2 significant implications of tonight's vote on whether you follow the professional advice of your planning officers or whether you accept the considerable risks of persisting with the discredited Regulation 19 local plan. Firstly, if you vote to ignore the advice of your professional officers and decide to continue with the current local plan, then the process is far from over and you would be accepting even more risk than the alternative proposed. What are those risks? The first risk is the funding of the infrastructure required by the plan. RCC would still need to find the funding monies to allow the infrastructure to support the plan to be built. This is far from certain, and the most interested party in the development has already confirmed that the monies are not available from them. If not fully funded, then the cost of the infrastructure required far exceeds RCC's budget, and it is hard to see how this could be achieved. Even if funding was found, the liability implications for RCC are huge in comparison with the annual budget. The second risk is the examination in public by the planning inspector. This is a major hurdle ahead. The EIP will be heavily contested by many local organisations and individuals who have sufficient funding to make a significant impression on the planning inspector. The risk of the current Regulation 19 local plan being thrown out is very high. Do you really want to accept that this is a risk worth taking for RCC? The chances of mitigating the risk are very low. If you vote tonight to keep the process going with the Regulation 19 local plan, then this vote is not the end of the process, it is just the beginning of the next stage. Secondly, the Places Directorate and your planning officers have obviously tried so far to stay with what they were being told was the agenda of the majority of the Council. Since the vote on the HIF bid, this has now changed, and it is highly significant that the planning officers are now recommending that the current Regulation 19 local plan be withdrawn. The planning officers understand the implications of this recommendation, and yet their professional advice to you is to withdraw the current plan. This must mean that, taking into account all the implications, they consider that this route represents the lowest risk in moving forward to ensure that Rutland has a viable plan. What are the consequences of you ignoring their professional opinion this evening? If you ignore their advice, then where does this leave them as a team of professionals? If you ignore their advice, what are the implications for Rutland as a viable council? Can you afford the risk of losing the services of the professional officers that you currently have? If you ignore their advice, who else will consider a planning role in Rutland when they know that their professional opinion will not be valued? I put it to you that by voting to withdraw the current local plan, you are choosing the path which has the least risk for Rutland and the greatest chance of succeeding in providing the best future for the county. Thank you.
Members, we have 5 minutes for any questions. Thank you very much. We now have a deputation from Kath Ovington, representing Langham Parish Council.
I represent the parish of Langham. My name is Kath Ovington. My deputation has 8 points, which cover both the local plan issue and the HIV vote that led to it. Councillors over the 12 months have evidently supported the development of the local plan, which contains details of the development in St George's. It is difficult for us to understand how half of you at the 11th hour then voted against the local plan by voting against the HIP, knowing that any plan that contains a section that's no longer relevant cannot be passed. Secondly, on March 22nd meeting, we were told that every councillor had the full facts about the risks and cost implications of refusing the HIP. Therefore, knowing that a vote against HIP would invalidate the local plan, waste over £1 million invested to date, would likely cost a further million to develop a new plan, and would expose Rutland to years of zero or very limited control over planning matters, it is extremely difficult to understand the thinking behind the no vote at half of the cast. Thirdly, the MOD will sell the site at North Rutland, so it will be developed. And whoever develops it, there will be individuals and communities who don't like it. At least with Rutland County Council in control, with a robust local plan behind them, Rutland folk would have a say in that development. As it is, we've chosen to hand over the fate of St George's to anyone who wants it, and have created an environment where, without the protection of the local plan, developers can do exactly what they want. Obviously, none of you would knowingly have put the county you represent in such an invidious, worrisome and dangerous position. So we would ask you to consider carefully whether you have truly acted in the best interest of Rutland in this instance and seize the opportunity to rectify the situation whilst there is time.
People can't hear who listening. Could you speak a bit more? Sorry.
Do I go back or do I continue, Chair?
No, carry on.
Okay. Point 4. The situation in which we find ourselves, late withdrawal of plan, waste of so much money and leaving the entire county exposed to developer exploitation, is unlikely to reassure the powers that be that this county is well run and capable of remaining independent. We fear that not only will Rutland's reputation be seriously damaged if we withdraw the local plan at this late stage, but longer term this might lead to the loss of the independence that we value so much. We are told that neighbourhood plans will be more important should there be no local plan. Of course it will be, but they'll also be far less effective because they will not be supported by the power of the local plan. In the battle against uncontrolled development, the local plan provides the paid artillery, the big guns. The neighbourhood plans provide the voluntary foot soldiers. The battle continues, but you have withdrawn the artillery and are effectively telling us that we're on our own for 4 years, and you will be unable to provide the support we have a right to expect. If this happens, you will collectively have reneged, perhaps unwittingly, on your promise when elected to protect your communities and the county of Rutland. 6. In Langham, our community most wanted a neighbourhood plan to protect us from the same fate as Barleythorpe. We wanted to remain separate from Oakham. So over 100 people invested 4 years of their lives developing a neighbourhood plan that we were assured would provide the protection we sought, with a policy calling for a green separation zone between Oakham and Langham Village. With no local plan to support our defence of the green separation zone, permitted development will trump the only card we have to play. We invested in a neighbourhood plan precisely because we were assured it would add weight to the local plan and provide us the protection we sought. With the local plan under threat, we feel completely betrayed by you. Towns and villages with no neighbourhood plan rely completely on the local plan to protect them from exploitation, and they must be extremely worried right now about their immediate future. And their councillors who need to allay their fears will find themselves in the unenviable position of trying to defend the indefensible. My final point, in trying to protect the wishes of our individual communities, it is important to think hard about the alternative and wider implications that may be worse. The intention behind the vote to refuse the HIF was perhaps to reflect the wishes of local communities and to prevent development of St George's. Well, you can't do the latter. Instead, we have created a far worse situation for those and all other communities in Langham, and we have a duty to rectify that situation. So in summary, we collectively find ourselves in a dangerous situation where over the next few years, the beauty and character of Rutland could and almost certainly will be radically changed, if not ruined, by unregulated building and development. It matters not one whit how we got here. Every decision to date has, I'm sure, been taken with the best intentions. But we must accept that those decisions have led us to an extremely precarious position. Between us, we now need to recognise that there's only one way out and we should take it together. We in Langham will support councillors 100% in taking 3 actions. Agreeing today not to withdraw the local plan, but this means you must also agree to revisit the HIF vote at the end of September. And then at that time, vote to accept the HIF. And then, with our local plan firmly in place, work together to protect Rutland and to ensure that St George's development is one in which the residents of Rutland can feel justifiably proud.
Thank you very much. Members, we have husbands and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Deputation from Tim Smith, Chairman of North Rutland Parish Council.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Tim Smith. I am Chair of North Rutland Parish Council,
and I represent them tonight. Towards the end of 2017, I attended a meeting of the council officers with our then parish chair. We thought we were going to be involved in a discussion on the future of the St George's Barracks site. Instead, we were given a presentation, along with a glossy brochure, on the decision that we now know was made in secret with the Ministry of Defence. A new town, bigger than Nottingham. There had been no prior consultation with those communities most likely to be affected by any sort of development at the St George's Barracks site. Yes, consultations followed. I attended them. 2 in North Rutland, 1 at the Officers' Mess, and 1 at Victoria Hall. They weren't meaningful consultations. We were simply invited to tinker around with a made plan. Do you want a sports kit here or there? There was a meaningful consultation when the communities were asked to submit their comments. In response to the question, do you support the proposed changes to the proposed housing requirements, 95% were against the development as proposed. You'll find the acknowledgement of these answers in the Appendix 5, page 960 of the 960-page document, Regulation 19. These answers were simply noted, and any proposals for change were just ignored. Even with the St George's Barracks Advisory Group, which comprised representatives of parish and town councils, Rutland County Council, the GENCO and the MOD, it was still the same. After a number of meetings, the only concession was a reduction of just over 3,000 to 2,215 houses. The communities that will be affected by development of the St George's Barracks site recognise that there will be a need to be some development when the army vacates the site. In North Rutland, we have twice surveyed our residents, and the definite response has been that if it has to be houses, then it should be in keeping with a typical Rutland parish. I might add that both North Rutland and East Western, our parishes cover St George's Barracks, are advanced in our neighbourhood plans. And master planning for the site recognise there will be development, but they won't be the same as the RC master plan as it now stands. And does it just have to be houses? They've been intended to suggest an alternative uses that might actually enhance an area that is right next to Rutland Water, which I hardly need to point out is a major tourist attraction. Centre Park, type of attraction. Science Park. Blue sky thinking perhaps, but just recall the recent announcement of a film studio in Boxford in Hertfordshire with all the inward investment and employment that will bring. Is Rutland County Council truly born of imagination to think creatively? If Rutland County Council votes to submit the emerging local plan examination or reapply for the HIT loan, then it runs the risk, well outlined in this report, and most likely result in the same attritional dialogue and action that have persisted over the past 4 years. I think Rutland County Council is to be congratulated on its future Rutland conversation, a genuine engagement with the residents. Would it not a reset leading to meaningful consultations with the communities affected be the best option, which this report emphasises? It is to be hoped that with new councillors, perhaps reflecting residents' opinion of the last 4 years, a new CEO, who we have found does listen to us, there will be that necessary, meaningful and productive dialogue. This report, which argues for withdrawal of the emerging local plan and the new local plan, is well thought out, and North Rutland is of the opinion that its recommendations should be adopted.
Thank you very much. Members, we have 5 minutes. Councillor Brown.
Andrew Brown, Ward Member for Leeds. Thank you, Mr. Smith. You mentioned regen code. I don't know what regen code is.
That is the firm that was employed with the MOD to come up with the master plan at the Paddington Gorges. But they also did, I think I might be saying the town down in Borden.
Anybody else? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Question from Jeremy.
Chairman, thank you. I'm a resident of Hambleton, but I speak and ask my question in a personal capacity. I'm interested to optimise a good decision-making process. To do that, I ask this question based on the risk assessment in the paper in front of councillors about the possibility of reconsidering the HIF grant. The assessment attaches a high likelihood to the risk that on reconsideration, the terms and conditions attaching to the HIF grant would be found to remain unsatisfactory. I address my question to the person presiding at this meeting. I ask, does the person presiding at the meeting agree that a delay of some 3 weeks before voting on the recommendation to withdraw the local plan would benefit councillors by enabling them to make a better assessment of that likelihood than is possible in the timescale that has been available before the date of this meeting and after the production of the report to the meeting?
Thank you. Response. This is an option in which council could vote on it, voted by one and seconded by another member this evening. Officers' assessment of risk is based on the HIF terms remaining unchanged. The members being advised on the risks in relation to the viability of the local plan prior to the original decision about HIF. Councillors will this evening consider the options that have been set before us by officers and reach our own conclusions. If council were to consider that HIF should be brought back, councillors would have an additional opportunity to consider all the issues. Do you have a supplementary?
Thank you. I would like as a supplementary to check that I've understood what I heard. What I hear is that it is legally possible and open to councillors. If a councillor proposes it and it is seconded and voted on, it is legally possible to choose to take some additional weeks before addressing the substantive recommendation of, in layman's language, a full and final decision on what to do about the plan.
I'll ask our leaders.
In brief, the answer is yes, that is possible. In effect, it would be adjourned.
Thank you very much. Item 9 is the deputation from Richard Herbert, please.
Richard Herwood, I'm a Lidington resident, here on my own behalf. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, 3 questions. Do councillors think that Rutland's residents have had enough time and information to give our opinions on the withdrawal and rewriting of the local plan? More time might possibly reduce the contentious issue that's mentioned at para 225 of tonight's report. My second point, I think, has already, unfortunately, sadly, been answered by Councillor Rozelle earlier on. And that is, can Rutland County Council assure us that they'll robustly protect the county from speculative development in the interim if you do decide to go ahead with revising the local plan? And my third point, are the County Council's 2 decisions, firstly to gift the 650 houses at Quarry Farm, and secondly to decline the HIF grant, final? One partial solution to easing pressure on our housing requirements
would be to claim back the 650 houses. We are told that the council continues to monitor and review this, whilst holding firm on your decision to decline the HIF grant. Of course, changing either decision risks making it easier for a developer to claim at planning appeals and the like that the council keeps changing its mind. I just wonder, would it be a good idea to ask Rutland residents at this stage what we think of this third point, revisiting the 650 houses and the HIF grant? Thank you, sir.
Members, we have 5 minutes. Have you got any questions?
Thank you very much.
We now have a deputation of Mr. Richard Camp, Vice Chairman of Mountain Parish Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear you correctly at the beginning in saying that I was allowed to overrun the time I had to present this slightly?
I'd like you to keep to this text.
Yes, I'll keep to the text. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, councillors and officers, irrespective of the advice in the recent report from the Strategic Director of Places that the local plan should be withdrawn, it is worth reconsidering some of the other reasons why so many of us think this should be done. First of all, the unacceptable size of the proposed St George's Barracks development. The controversial Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, between the Council and the MOD states accurately that the adjacent villages, and I quote, will be key stakeholders but will potentially be dwarf communities. The two adjacent villages would surely be unacceptably and permanently swamped. Secondly, regarding democracy and transparency, the above MOU between the Council and the MOD regarding the barracks redevelopment as well as the gifting of 650 Rutland homes at Quarry Farm to South Kesteven Council was set up without proper transparency or council ratification. Neither of these important planning issues nor the 2018 evolving master plan, which was used to support the HIF bid, was subject to proper public consultation, contrary to the Council's statement of community involvement. Commercial sensitivity has been stated to justify the lack of transparency regarding the content of the HIF bid and the extensive legal and other analysis of its acceptance risk. Furthermore, 15 parish councils or meetings submitted representations to the inspectorate concerning the local plan that objected to the proposed St George's Barracks development. Only 3 supported it. Support now by the Council for the submitted local plan may suggest a lack of democracy and acceptance of non-transparent process, and further confirm the SGB plans as unsound and not legally compliant, at least in the eyes of many, including the plan inspector. Thirdly, excessive housing development in Rutland. The local plan indicates that almost 40% of residents commute out of the county to work, the majority most likely by car. Now, recent national research shows convincingly that most garden communities become car-based commuter estates. The planned barracks development is thus likely to lead to numerous commuting car trips, there being no clear evidence, as far as I know, for employers who are interested in business development at the barracks. This and the increased Rutland housing resulting from the gift to South Kesteven Council of 650 homes will risk aggravation of the climate emergency. Rural housing, I think, should be more controlled and partly limited to housing for local employees. For example, as others have said, jobs before houses, in line with the National Planning Policy statement that sufficient land of the right type should be available in the right places and at the right time for housing. Fourthly, is the St George's Barracks development a potential threat to the town centres of Oakham and Uppingham? The viability and vitality of these two centres has been the subject of a recent report by First Plan Limited, actually published on the Examination Library recently, who states that complacency on this matter is risky. However, the report makes no mention of the potential adverse effects on our two town centres of a large barracks development. Apart from the attraction of footfall to local SGB facilities, a single large development towards the east may also increase the risk of drawing footfall to Stamford, away from our two towns, to their potentially serious detriment. Fifthly, SGB infrastructure development. The timing, extent and ultimate cost of this is uncertain, which indicates risk. A recent rather amazing decision, I think, confirms that the SGB electricity supply would be via cables in a trench created by excavation of the highway and or verges from the substation immediately east of Oakham, southwards via the town pass and the A6003, under the new bridge, up to Mountain Top, and then eastwards towards St George's Barracks. And this almost 6-mile excavation would be highly disruptive and really unnecessarily very costly. Number 6 is the Barracks brownfield previously developed land. I would argue that it is not all that. The golf club opened almost 5 decades ago, and the airfield has been unused by aircraft since then. It is not justified, I think, to target development on obviously long-standing green land, including precious limestone grassland, by using selective interpretation of National Planning Policy Framework principles. Interpretation of the latter indicates that the airfield and golf course should not be considered as brownfield, and planning is aimed on them in the St George's Barracks proposed development. It would be of great benefit, finally, and lower risk to the county if the submitted local plan is withdrawn without delay as recommended, and more appropriate redevelopment of St George's Barracks planned urgently. Any suggestion that a 350 home development at St George's Barracks would not be viable is highly open to question. There are thriving villages of that size in Rutland. And finally, of course, the 650 home gift to South Kesteven Council should be revoked. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Very much, Mr. Members, 5 minutes, any questions? No?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, members, can we go back to standing orders for that proposal, please? Councillor Oxley, second vote. Councillor Yes. Councillor Waller. All in favour? Sorry.